Hi, friends. I am Marie Woods, founder of Life Above Foundation, your host, a professional counselor, family and marriage therapist, and a wholeness life coach. Welcome to Relationship Real Talk, the podcast where we dive deep and tackle the toughest relationship challenges Christians face today. Are you tired of struggling with unforgiveness, past wounds, and conflicts? Feeling lonely or having trouble communicating? Wrestling with trust issues or trying to balance your faith with your relationship goals? Feeling stuck and stagnant in your relationship? You are in the right place. Here at the Relationship Real Talk, we get real and cover a wide range of topics, including relationship anxiety, trauma bonds, infidelity, estrangement, toxic dynamics, dating after divorce, and how to heal from relationship trauma and grow and build healthy and lasting relationships. We're not just about identifying the problems. We're all about finding real, integrated solutions from multiple disciplines and offering professional help from different fields to mend and strengthen your relationships. So, let's get started on this journey together, one honest, heartfelt conversation at a time. So let me introduce Dr. Grant Mullen to you. He is a retired mental health physician from Ontario, Canada, who writes and teaches internationally along with his wife, Cathy. How medical treatment, deliverance, and the healing of our emotional wounds all work together to break the chains of emotional bondage. Dr. Mullen, he has a special interest in how depression, anxiety, and mood disorders affect Christians. Through his own personal crisis, Dr. Mullen experienced the transforming power of God's love to heal his heart. His passion is to see Christians transformed mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. So today our topic will shift the focus a little bit, but integrate all those aspects to focus on our relationship talk today. Dr. Mullen is the author of Emotionally Free, a prescription for healing body, soul, and spirit. I highly recommend our audience to check out his book. He has over 20 teaching DVDs. I believe he has more than that now, and an online personal transformation program called Free Your Mind. Welcome, Dr. Mullen, to our podcast.
Well, it's awfully nice to be back with you, Marie.
Good. So I am so excited about our topic today, which is mental health and the relationships. It's a fascinating, interesting topic, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yes, because without mental health, it's hard to have great relationships.
That's right. That's right. So, Dr. Mullen, you have been with our program, our online conference, global conference before, and we have really interesting, great conversation around mental health, trauma healing, spiritual growth, those aspects. But today, since our podcast focuses on relationships, and let's start with this question. What are the key indicators of a healthy compare an unhealthy relationship?
Well, I think in our experience and our working with couples, I think the key to a healthy relationship is that healthy relationships are giving relationships and unhealthy relationships are taking relationships. So the way we describe it is in an unhealthy relationship, the two members of the couple are leaning on each other. Like, in other words, you prop me up, but you prop me up, and if anyone moves, they all fall down. And so that's unhealthy because that's codependency. It's when people are relying on the other spouse to make me happy, meet all my emotional needs, which of course is impossible. And so they're leaning on each other, but basically they're trying to extract from the other person happiness, joy, meaning, purpose, meet all my emotional needs. Well, that's never going to work. And so then, in fact, this is what happened to Cathy and I. We ended up in a marriage crisis for that reason. And that's how we went to see a counselor. And that's how we learned all this stuff, is through our own pain. And the counselor taught us all this stuff about codependency. But a healthy relationship is a giving relationship. So in that picture, the two people are standing side by side in contact with each other, but not leaning on each other. So in other words, they both have their identity secure in their relationship with God. So then they have something to give to the other person. And rather than leaning or depending on the other person, which is, so if anyone shifts, they fall over. But this way, they're standing independently, but in contact, supporting each other and like encouraging each other. So they're actually giving, like, how can I make your life better? And then how can I make your life better? So that's why when people talk about marriage is 50-50, no, marriage is 100%, 100%, which
I
is
totally agree.
people say, how can I make your life better? No, how can I make your life better rather than make me happy? So those are, to me, that's the foundation of a healthy relationship. Now, of course, there's lots of other aspects to it, but that to me is one of the most important things to think about is what a healthy relationship is. Also, too, here's another point that I've learned is if you're in a healthy relationship, it should relax you.
Mm.
And if it makes you tense, then there's something unhealthy that's going on.
Okay.
So that's why, actually, that's an advice I give to young people looking for a spouse, or a business partner. But if they're looking for a spouse, this is what I told my adult children when they were looking for a spouse. I said, you find someone who relaxes you, because if they don't relax you when you're dating, it's not going to get better when you're married.
Mm. That's a so important indication. You said it, even especially in dating relationship. Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel being seen, heard, understood? Do you feel even comfortable, in the interaction? Or do you have a tip toes, always concern, care about another person, how he or she feel about me? Right.
That's right. But even when you're dating, you don't want to be in a codependent relationship where you make me happy. That's not going to be a long-lasting relationship. So even in dating, all these principles apply. You want to date someone who is giving, because actually, think of it this way: you're giving out of the overflow of your own emotional health. And as a Christian, what we teach is the closer you walk with God, the more He meets your emotional needs. And so you give out of your overflow to your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend.
That's a so important key point, as I can tell, as you were talking about, that two individuals, they develop a healthy view, healthy value system about him or herself in their relationship with God. Now we're talking about in the concept as Christians, right? So no matter it's dating relationship or marriage relationship, so two individuals, they have to develop a healthy, secure identity and before how they contribute to the relationship.
Yes, and this is what we need to teach to pre-marriage couples. Is that I think that when people marry, especially when they marry young, but actually could happen at any age, is that if they marry before they've discovered who they are and are firm in their own identity, they will expect their new spouse to tell me who I am, make me feel like a good person. But if they already have that resolved in the relationship with Jesus, and they have their own sense of self and self-confidence, then they have something to give from. But I find that if you marry very young, you haven't quite learned that yet. And so that's where there's the greatest risk of marrying, because you make me feel good, and I will like you as long as you make me feel good. And so then that just may not last very long. But if you marry saying, I know who I am, and I know who I want to be with, and I want to be with someone who also knows who they are and can stand alone on their own feet, and let's join. So I just would love to teach that to pre-marriage. I wish we had a pre-marriage seminar, but we can't do that at our resort in the Dominican Republic.
Right. Yeah, we will talk about that a little bit more toward the end. But our listeners, I believe they are in different season of life. Some might be a single, some might be in the dating relationship, some might be in the marriage relationship. So whatever stage and the season you are in, so I hope this topic today will relate to you. So also, Dr. Mullen, I heard people say, hey, you complete me, or I complete you. Or sometimes I heard people say, you just draw the best out of me. And what do you think of those kind of comments?
Okay, well, I like the comment of you draw the best out of me. I mean, that's a wonderful thing to say about your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend, because what that means is that when I'm with you, all my best qualities just start to shine. Okay, which then usually means is because the person who said it is probably also shining. Okay,
Right.
and that they're being good. But the first thing you said was you complete me. That is utterly dysfunctional. That is just the worst thing. I know it sounds so beautiful, and you
Yeah.
can draw these circles, and it's so nice. It sounds so perfect. But to people who you and I, we deal with marriage problems.
Mhm.
That is the worst reason to get married, because basically you're saying, I'm so codependent, I can't live without you, and you have to meet all my emotional needs, or I'm a broken person, and if you're not there meeting my needs, I'm just going to be suffering. So I need to have you around all the time. So that is so utterly dysfunctional that you should find your identity in Jesus. Jesus completes you. And then you give to your spouse out of your overflow. But if you say, you complete me, what you're basically saying, and is if you don't, I'm going to get really angry with you and I'm going to try to control and manipulate you until you do.
Wow. Wow. That I can see that when you were talking about this, I can see the unhealthy and the dynamic between the two. How can I manipulate you in order to meet my needs? Right. But you are saying, we have to become a healthy person in order to contribute to the relationship, make the relationship healthy.
In fact, what we teach actually in our sessions is that to have to have a healthy marriage, the individuals have to become healthy. And so when my wife and I, when we had our marriage crisis so long ago, we thought we just needed to see the counselor, how to communicate better, how to be nice to each other. But our counselor said, he says, you two are so messed up. You have so much emotional baggage yourselves. I have to see you separately before I see you together.
Hmm.
And so that's when he taught us, you have to have your own healed heart. So you have something to contribute. So you're not leaning on each other. So I thought, okay, Cathy has all the problems. I'm sure she'll need lots of therapy and I'll just go once or twice. But a year and a half later, I was still seeing him. And then what actually happened is once I had dealt with my baggage, Cathy was so much easier to live with.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your personal story. I mean, it takes courage, and I can see that you are in a healthy place so you can share with us.
But the key to our marriage healing was we each dealt with our own issues so that we could become unentangled and stand to Jesus. We developed our own personal identity in our relationship with Jesus. So then we would, how can I bless you? How can I contribute to your life rather than make me happy? Or you better complete me or I'll be annoyed.
Yes, yes, completely me. So what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Mullen, is that it's our own responsibility to 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 make a healthy view of ourselves. It's not the partner or spouse responsibility to complete us through their behavior, their words, so on.
Yeah, in fact, so many people, like our counselor said, the problem is not the person you married, it's the baggage you brought into the marriage. So that if you then just find another spouse, you'll just go through this again because you're just going to take the same baggage into that new marriage. And he said that if you deal with your baggage, well, if you both do it, then the person you marry can work out beautifully. But to say, oh well, you don't complete me, I better find someone else who will, the problem will just recur because you've never dealt with your own issues. And people don't realize that that's the key to a healthy marriage is deal with your own issues first. Get rid of your own baggage. So see, here's my problem. Now when I go to a wedding, I just see these two poor young adults dragging their baggage to the altar to be joined until death do us part. And I'm thinking, oh, if only someone would talk to them about get your baggage removed and then you can have a healthy marriage.
Mm. So I can see the premarital counseling, how important that is. Literally save people's lives from later on the troubles.
Oh yeah. Oh, I wish I had known all these things. Before I got married, it would have just saved us all that tension.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, pain's the greatest motivator. If you're not in pain, you don't do anything. So when people are engaged or dating, all they see is Cupid and little hearts floating around. So there's no pain. This person's perfect. I don't need any help. She'll complete me.
Yes. Yes. That's a good point. Yeah. Pain does motivate us to grow and to change.
And God uses our pain to lead us into greater healing.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So, okay, that's before we move on, I just want to highlight what you just said. It's our personal responsibility to grow into a healthy perspective, healthy view of ourselves, our identity with God, and make that correct about ourselves, have a self-confidence, secure in our own identity before we even, start a new relationship for folks that are dating or single. Right. It is not another person's responsibility to fix us, to make us complete, or our spouse. When the folks out there, you're married, our spouse is not our problem. Our spouse is not our enemy. Like what you said, it's our own emotional baggage we have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, it's your spouse that will expose your baggage.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
when you're getting mad at your spouse, all they're doing is exposing your own baggage, probably.
Exactly. So good, so good. Wonderful. So, okay, let's move on to the next question. Talk about the impact of mental health, as we have been talking about this in the last few years, and that's your specialty as well. On relationships, can you tell us how mental health issues affect the relationships? Can you give us an example?
Oh yes, it has an enormous impact. So when I started out in mental health, remember I came into mental health from general practice, and so I was a GP. Actually, I was an anesthesiologist, then a general practitioner. So I fell into mental health because so many people were coming to see me with emotional problems, and then and so many couples came to see me that they were struggling in their marriage. But then I would, what happened, actually, what happened was every time, and this is still the case, every time a couple comes to see me who are struggling with their relationship, I just have started asking, or actually I started this quite a long time ago, do either of you ever struggle with depression or anxiety? And I could not believe, of the people who came to see me, I mean, obviously they made an appointment with me, the overwhelming majority of the couples who were struggling in their relationship, one or both had a mental health problem that usually was undiagnosed and untreated. And once we treated the mental health problem, then so many of the issues melted away. And so we had one couple, Cathy and I were helping, and we saw them many times. The wife was she just was so unhappy with her husband because he just was not showing love because he came from a loveless family. He had no idea how to show love in a marriage. And of course, so she was wilting and she was so frustrated with him. And we were training him on how to show love and helping her to be more accommodating. But then after several visits, I thought, she's sounding depressed. So I thought, and then I started asking her, are you getting, so I took her through the depression symptoms. She says, well, yeah, I have some of all that. I said, well, go and talk to your doctor because you might need medicine. So she did. She started on her medicines. We saw her then, I don't know, a month or two later. How are you feeling? Oh, very much better. How are things with your husband? Oh, he's fine. And that was it. We never had to see them again, but I still see them socially. They're doing fine. But so in other words, the tension in the marriage just disappeared when her mood went back to normal. And so I saw so many couples that once the spouse that had the most symptoms was treated, then their marriage improved so much, or it exposed that the other spouse was also too anxious and needed to be treated. So see, these problems are so common. At least 20% of the population is struggling with their mood, but 80% are unaware of it because they're mild, but bad enough to interfere with the relationship. And
Right.
so And so, yes, mental health issues, particularly depression, anxiety, and bipolar, they're the most common. They have a huge impact on a marriage because if a person is struggling with their mental health, one, they're having trouble relaxing, they're having trouble concentrating, and they're unhappy. And so that's why they will become codependent. Like, you make me happy, stop making me anxious. You're always making me angry. How come you're not doing what I want you to do? Because I'm anxious and I want to control you. So it has a huge impact. So that's why now every couple I see, in fact, there's a couple I've just started working with right now, and the wife just says he's so controlling. Well, control is caused by anxiety. So I'm seeing him next, and we're going to talk about his anxiety. How can we help his anxiety so he's not so controlling?
Yeah.
So yes, mental health is an enormous issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, too, if a person has unpredictable moods, the spouse just doesn't know how to relate to them, can't get close to them because they don't know, like they're walking on eggshells all the time. It's an enormous problem. And if a person's depressed, they're not enjoying their life. So that's very, very difficult. So I've seen so many marriages dramatically improved when one or both spouses recognize that, oh yeah, I am struggling with my mood, and they do the appropriate treatment. Mm-hmm. So that's why on our website, we have a self-assessment checklist for people to just, I just say, look, if go and do your own self-assessment. If you have those symptoms, tell me.
Yeah. Wow. That's another really very key indicator with when you talk about this. Couples come to counseling section, as I encounter as well, and they think their struggles because their spouse, because the relationship doesn't work, so on. But without realizing we're owning their own mental health conditions, the issues. But as a practitioners and physician and counselors, hey, we can look into the person's situation, like you said, do a diagnose and go on your website and check the anxiety, depression, mood swing, those kind of stuff, and find out what's going on in our own lives, right? Do I need a treatment? How have my life contribute to the relationship for good or for bad? So those are the question mark we can, check for ourselves.
So because we talked earlier about dealing with our own baggage, but also our own mental health, because they're so intertwined, because both will have terrible effects on marriage. If you're depressed, anxious, or having mood swings, that of course will magnify any baggage issues you've never dealt with. And so it's incredibly disruptive. But the results of treatment, I've just seen so many marriages restored, and people are happier than they ever thought possible. Just all we did was deal with their baggage and their mental health.
Yes. So this is so good. So I'm reminded of your program. I have attended your program before. You have a program called Free Your Mind. How to change your thoughts, renew your mind, and then change our moods and the emotions. And that's what you deal with. The person's body, soul, and the spirit all connected with each other.
Yeah, and that can transform your own life. It'll transform your marriage too, even your career and your walk with God. Because if your mood's off, it's very spiritual. It certainly affects you spiritually.
Yes. So here's the thing. I probably threw you a curveball about this question. So for two partners, especially married couples, if one person is growing, advancing, and changing, but the other person cannot see him or herself the issues, character, personality, whatever, mental health, like what you said, emotional baggage probably come from a long time ago. So how do you treat that? How can you help?
You mean, and so what you're saying is that one spouse has insight and they're making progress on their healing journey, and the other spouse just doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably the norm. That's probably the most common scenario, actually. It's actually uncommon for both spouses to say, yes, I want healing, both. Okay, that is unusual.
Right.
What you're saying actually is the most common, and it is so painful. That is really frustrating and painful, because you can't force someone. You can't force someone. So the approach that I've used with limited success is can't you see your other spouse growing and developing? And here's what that spouse is doing. Here are the steps. Wouldn't you like the same improvement you're observing in your spouse? So that has sometimes worked. Let's say, don't you see how much happier and relaxed your husband or wife is? Wouldn't you like to feel that way? I've had some response to that. Or basically just saying, you have issues too. It's not just them. What about yourself? Or are you happy? Well, no, it's what she does. No, but are you happy? And were you happy before you got married? So that, but it's so frustrating. It's also, the same question, Marie, is if you have a spouse with a mental illness and they just refuse to agree that they have an illness and go for help, that is so difficult. I get asked that question every time I do a seminar. What do I do with my spouse? And in that case, you pray that God will get their attention.
Yes. Yes, get their attention, the self-awareness. If they don't even see their own problem and own their problem, so there's a real problem there.
Yeah, there are many people in marriage crisis, and the depressed spouse blames the other spouse for their depression. That I wouldn't be depressed if she wasn't making me depressed.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard loop to get out of.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. True. I see people sometimes that really break that bonds in order for the person come to the place of realization, take a responsibility to make a change. Right.
Now, sometimes this has helped. Sometimes is I'll say, well, what was your mood like in your teens and before you ever met her? Did you struggle with your mood a bit then? And usually the answer is yes. And I'll say, well, marriage has just magnified that. Why don't we treat the root of this that was even before you knew her? So
that's a good point.
Sometimes that works, because usually depression comes on gradually from adolescence on, and it just gradually gets worse and worse. And so your spouse would then be the last straw. So sometimes that works.
Yes, I see that happens. We have to go back to history, like what you said, emotional baggage, and deal with what's unresolved issue in the past. That's good.
Sometimes it's like, well, what was your childhood like? Well, then no wonder your wife's going to be triggering you if you had that kind of relationship with your parents and your mother.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that works.
You're talking about dealing with the root issue, the early on relationships.
Yeah, really, I'm just talking about the baggage you dragged into your marriage that now you're blaming your spouse for.
Right. Also, you talk about the codependency in the relationship that think, oh, my marriage is gonna fix me, my spouse is gonna make me complete, gonna meet my needs, so on. So
yeah, we call that a recipe for disaster.
Disaster. Oh, we think the spouse is our rescuer, our savior. No, Jesus Christ is the savior.
but actually, Marie, that is so common that people marry the person who is their rescuer. Like, that is so common.
Right.
But they don't use that word, but that's you make me happy, which means you are my rescuer. And as soon as you stop making me happy, then I'm going to manipulate you until you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever it takes, whatever that looks. Well, this is so good discussion. I enjoy the time with you, Dr. Mullen. And I know I have a few more questions to ask if you're okay. And our listeners and stay with us in this. So I wonder, how important is it for fathers to share similar values and life goals?
Yes, enormously important. In fact, I think there was a very famous book, business book, and it said you have to be on the same bus. You have to be going in the same direction. So that's why I caution people, don't marry someone who doesn't share your same spiritual worldview. If a Christian is marrying someone who has no faith if a Christian's marrying a non-Christian, that's going to create just a whole new level of tension in your marriage. So you need to marry someone who has the same worldview, the same values, the same foundational values, which usually, in my view, is that if you have the same spiritual values, you should likely have the same values. So I would say that's your most important criteria. Don't marry someone who doesn't have the same spiritual values, which means the same worldview, and which is the same view of morality and right and wrong. I mean, that's your foundation. So, because if you marry someone who has a completely different view of what's right and what's wrong, I mean, you're going to be in conflict immediately, because you'll just say no, but that's wrong. They'll say, oh no, the family I grew up in, that's perfectly fine. So to me, you have to be aligned spiritually. That is critically important, because then Jesus is the head of your home, and if Jesus isn't the head of your home, they're going to have conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So then spiritually you need to be compatible, but then you also have to have similar life goals. And so so if someone says, I want to be a farmer, and the other one says, no, I want to be a foreign missionary, I mean, they could be awfully nice people and very spiritually compatible and lovers of God, and even have dealt with all their baggage and be totally healthy emotionally, but they have different life goals. They may be wonderfully compatible. If one wants to have a farm and the other wants to be a foreign missionary, that is not resolvable.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to have the same life goals. In other words, where do you want to be in 5 years? What's important to you? Because you need to have the same life goals, and also be able to compromise, because it's either you go to the foreign missions or you stay and farm. If you're going to be together, someone has to give in.
Mm-hmm.
So the same spiritual, moral worldview foundation, and then the same life goals. I mean, otherwise you just are going to be in conflict all the time. So you marry someone because, oh, you just make me feel good, but what are you going to do for the rest of your life?
Right.
Where are you going to live, and how are you going to bring up your children? What moral values, what spiritual values are they going to have? What are your goals vocationally, geographically? Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely critical to me to be spiritually aligned, and then have the same life goals, and to be together on it. And you see, if you have a loving, giving relationship, it's so much easier to resolve those issues than if you're codependent and taking and you complete me. Then as soon as there's a disagreement, then everything falls apart and there's conflict. So yeah, it's absolutely critical. And those are all questions that should come up long before marriage. I mean, those are dating questions, or for sure engagement questions. But really,
Wow.
that should be discussed before you're engaged, because breaking an engagement is very painful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sooner better than later.
Actually, my wife and I did. She found out about a pre-marriage seminar that was going on in our city, and she said, we're not engaged, but I think we're serious. So she was pushing me a little bit, like, are we really serious? And she said, I think we should go to this before we're engaged. And so I said, well, yeah. She was testing me. Are we really serious? I said, well, okay. And so we went to this pre-marriage seminar. We were the only ones there who weren't engaged. And so it gave us the checklist of all those things you just mentioned, all the worldview, all the, are you aligned sufficiently as Christians? It was a Christian event. And so we were able to use that as a discussion tool for the next month or so. And we gradually went through every line privately after the seminar. And at the end, we said, we really are aligned. I guess we can get engaged. So we were so delighted. Where the couple that we went with, they were already engaged, and their marriage didn't last at all.
Wow.
They hadn't discussed all these things before.
Yes. Well, this is so important, our listeners out there. I mean, this is the tips from our expert, from Dr. Mullen, from his decades, years of experience, his own experience. Oh my gosh, this really can save people's lives, from going into heartaches and the troubles, unnecessary suffering. And it's so good, so good. I love this discussion with you. So the next question actually tied up to this question, as you were talking about singles prepare themselves for, engagement or marriage. And how can, singles prepare themselves for God-centered relationship as Christians?
Well, the first question that they should ask is, how good is my relationship with God? And is God my number one priority in my life? Okay, that is your first criteria. And people may not have ever been asked that. And
Right.
so if I was counseling a young adult, I'll say, what is the most important priority in your life? You know, is it your work? Is it your sports? Or is it your relationship with God? Because you need to have a firm relationship with God. But then you really have to get to know yourself. And so that's why I think a person, before they get engaged, should be seeing a counselor on their own. And they'll say, well, why? I'm doing just fine. Well, yeah, because you're single. Okay?
Right.
You're
Exactly.
not being challenged.
Right.
Okay. But as soon as you're in a relationship, they're going to hit and stomp all over your emotional buttons. So you
Right.
need to go to a counselor to say, I'm considering a long-term relationship. I need someone to go over, you know, my past and how is it affecting me now? So that's why it's so important for them to know themselves. Now, in our online course, we could walk people through that, but it's people don't realize, they just say, "Oh, I'm feeling fine," and you know that's what we all do. We get married, and then with time goes on, the baggage starts to conflict. And but that would be to, what's your relationship with God, and how well do you know yourself? And you know, really, what I'm really saying is, how have you resolved the pain of your upbringing?
Mm.
Now, people don't think of it in those terms, but that's really the issue, because that's the size of your baggage.
Right.
Because I mean, no one's had a perfect past, no one's had perfect parents, and also the counselor should talk about what was the example you saw in your family growing up, the marriage example. Because
Mm.
if you're thinking about getting married, you will instinctively repeat the model that you observed growing up, because that's the only marriage you were exposed to. And so no marriage is perfect. And so the counselor needs to talk about, well, how was love expressed at your house? Did you feel loved? Was there any love at all? Or you know, and so you know, what was the level of dysfunction in your family growing up, and how did your parents treat each other, and how often did they fight, and what was going on, and was there, you know, how much dysfunction did you observe and live with, and then how can you prevent that from recurring? So those are all things that would be so valuable to do before you get married. But then once you're married, and if you are in conflict, then you need to talk to a counselor, because it could be that the environment you grew up in is spilling over into your current marriage. Because if you were treated really poorly and love wasn't expressed at all or well in your family of origin, you're going to really struggle with expressing it in your new family.
Mm.
That was the person I was telling you about earlier. The poor man, he grew up in a loveless home. He didn't know how to shower love on his spouse, and so he had to learn that.
Yes, exactly. If we haven't from the first place experienced or received the unconditional love, ideally, how can we give the unconditional love to our spouse?
Yeah, and since no parent, no family is perfect, that's a really important thing for a person considering marriage, or anyone who's currently in a marriage difficulty, is to talk to the counselor about their family of origin. You know, that's what the counselor did for us. I mean, Cathy and I went because we were having a marriage issue, but then he took us each separately back to our families of origin. What was your life growing up? What lies did you start to believe about yourself? And so because that has such an impact on your current relationship. So, but for someone considering marriage, that would be so valuable to do. But when you're young, you don't think about that.
No.
But if you are having any difficulty with your marriage, think about what your family was like growing up and talk to your counselor about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to be going with your spouse. It's so important actually to go by yourself to the counselor. That's what worked for us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I see people, they are either they are dating in a dating relationship, boyfriend, girlfriend, or married relationship. There's so much, so like you mentioned about unresolved past issues, emotional baggage, and the pattern carried on from the family of origin. And those kind of things, before we even enter into the contract, the eternal relationship, it's better to clear them out the way. and get ourselves healthy by going to talk to a counselor, a professional, and figure things out.
Yeah, and pre-marriage programs are so valuable. I just wish they would do them earlier, because usually they're rushed into the last month before they get married, or it's delayed. And by that time, they've been spending money on arrangements, and the invitations have gone out, and there's pressure. And because if the pre-marriage counseling uncovers some really serious issues, you want to know that long before the wedding.
Right. Yes.
I encourage people to do your pre-marriage counseling, well, as soon as you're engaged or just before.
Oh, good. So I want to hear more. I want you to give our audience the info, how to, get to know you and your website. What's the premarital, counseling, the section, what does it look like? I will let you to give our audience the information toward the end. But before we wrap up today's section, I know this topic I can go on with you. I just enjoy the discussion with you always, every time, Dr. Mullen, and you have the wealth of knowledge and experience. So last questions I have is that, there's so many unhealthy, toxic relationships going on around us, relationships. So how can one, we talk about seek help, professional counseling and so on, church, help, whatever it can be. What are some common misconceptions about Christian relationships?
Yes, there is. Well, one, we're both Christians, everything should be fine. I'm married a Christian, everything should be fine. Well, that you can marry a Christian with loads of baggage. And so just because a person's a Christian doesn't mean that they may have all kinds of issues. Okay. But here is the issue that creeps into Christian marriages, and unfortunately it creates all kinds of conflict in the church and theologically, is the male domination of women. This is a big issue in the Christian community. And because the Bible, the submission issue, okay, it's this submission stuff. But then that can just be an excuse for misogyny, just the hatred and manipulation and control of women. And unfortunately, there's way too many Christian groups that are not handling this very well, and that they are justifying male domination of women in Christian marriage. And what's happening is that the woman feels like a doormat, and that she just has to obey, the chief of the family, and that it's not an equal relationship. It's, the head and the servant, and it causes all kinds of relationship problems and huge sexual problems because, you owe me sex. Okay, so that's terrible. And so I would say that is a stumbling block that has been built into the Christian community, unfortunately. That's unique to, well, I suppose it's not unique to Christians, but it's a misunderstanding of the submission thing. So in our relationship, Cathy and I are equal, and we're interdependent, not codependent. So in other words, standing on our own feet. And what we've done in our family is we've created zones of expertise. So Cathy has her areas of expertise, and in those areas, I defer to her. And in my area of expertise, she defers to me. And I don't mess with her areas of expertise because she knows more about that than I do. And so that way we are equals, and we're co-managers of the home. But as far as this is a stumbling block in the Christian marriage, and it hasn't always been well handled because of this misunderstanding of this submission that's in the Bible.
Mm. Well, I can just, let you go on and preach to us, really preach to the choir. This is such a good topic. I feel like we need to take another section episode to just, focus on this topic. Yeah, so true, so true. And well, I think this is not just mental health issue, not just emotional issue. This is more spiritual, theological issue.
Yeah, it's honoring your spouse. So that, to me, the solution is you give yourself as Christ gave himself for the church. So that's not control and manipulating your wife. That's you give yourself as Jesus gave himself. So that, to me, solves a lot of problems if you look at your spouse that way.
you were mentioning about two parties, husband and wife, they're equal in that position. It's not I'm your boss, I'm the head, you're the servant, you submit to me, you meet all my needs, those type of things.
We are equal before Jesus, and that we are mutually supportive. And basically, my view to Cathy is, how can I serve you? And her view to me is, well, how can I serve you? And so that's sort of how we resolve that. So we need to honor each other and give ourselves for each other. Marriage is 100%, not 50-50.
So it's a mutual reciprocal, like we mutually respect each other, we trust each other, and we contribute to the relationship, both parties. It's not just one, but both.
Exactly. Yeah, and the other toxicity that creeps into marriages is control and manipulation. And control and manipulation is when you're trying to extract from the other person, meet my emotional needs. So that's evil.
So that's evil, that's sinful. Also, I see that's not us. It's more in the relationship, it's more me. The egocentric, is I focused, another person become a servant, just come alongside me to make me happier, kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's the codependency thing, and that's because they have an unhealed heart, all the baggage they brought in, and they married someone to make them happy, and so then they have to force them to make me happy, and so you use control manipulation. That's the most convenient tool we have.
Right. Yes. Again, that alone, the toxic relationship, we can talk in another episode. So there's so much more depth into it. But thank you, Dr. Mullen, so much for your time and your wisdom, your knowledge, experience today. And in this episode, I certainly enjoyed spending the time with you in our discussion.
Yeah. And people could reach me on my website. We've got lots of information there.
So please tell us how people can find you.
Well, go to drgrantmullen.com, drgrantmullen.com. We have 600 videos on how to change how you think on our website. And then we have the online program, Free Your Mind, which will actually walk you through short videos that you can do on your phone. It'll just walk you through the whole process of how to be transformed mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And then we have a marriage retreat coming up in November at an adults-only resort in the Dominican Republic, where we can actually, for 5 days, just walk through everything you and I just talked about. In the mornings, in the afternoon, you're free to vacation. So it's a fabulous, fun time.
Oh, sounds wonderful. I hope our listeners will check your website out. And for couples, you may need to find out more details about the couples retreat. Well, this is a fun discussion with you, Dr. Mullen. Thanks once again.
Always great being with you, Marie.
Thank you for our listeners, and stay tuned, and we will see you next section.